All right, so today we're going deep on some really powerful ideas.
Yeah, we got a good one for you today.
We're going to try and do this in a way that you're going to be able to take away some pretty big ideas from it.
Yeah, think of it as like, we've gone through a lot of material and we're giving you like the cheat sheet.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah, a cheat sheet or like a shortcut to understanding this.
Yeah, exactly. So you could spend less time kind of wading through it and more time actually getting to like the meat of it.
Yeah, and today we're diving into Kahlil Gibran's The Prophet.
Ooh, one of my favorites.
It's really incredible, and it's been around for over 100 years.
Yeah, it came out in 1923 and it just keeps resonating with people.
And it's interesting, too, because Gibran himself was an artist and actually illustrated the book.
Yeah, I love that about it. It's like he really poured his whole soul into it, the words and the visuals.
It's beautiful. And, there was someone who was also an illustrator by the name of Claude Brandon who said that Gibran's words had this really unique power and beauty to them, and he was really captivated by that.
Yeah, he really hit the nail on the head there.
Yeah, it's pretty special. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Gibran, you might also recognize some of his other works, like The Madman or Sand and Foam.
Yeah, those are great too.
They all kind of have this unique perspective on life and humanity.
Yeah, he definitely had a unique way of looking at the world.
So at the center of The Prophet, we meet this guy named El-Mustafa.
Yeah, and he's been living in this city of Orphalese for 12 years, just waiting for his ship to come back to take him home.
Yeah, like counting down the days.
Yeah, and finally in that 12th year, he sees it.
That must have been an incredible moment.
Oh, I bet it was just pure joy.
Yeah, but as he's like walking down this hill toward the city, he starts to feel really sad.
Oh, I can only imagine he's about to leave this place where he's been for so long. It's got to be tough.
Yeah, and it's more than just leaving a place. He feels like he's scattered pieces of himself all over the city.
Yeah, like he's leaving a part of him behind.
Exactly. He even says too many fragments of the spirit.
Wow.
It's like it's not just leaving a house or a job. It's way deeper than that.
Yeah, it's like leaving a part of your soul.
Yeah, and he talks about his heart being made sweet with hunger and with thirst. Like he's really been touched by his experiences there.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
It's powerful, and you can really feel this tension in him, like this pull of the sea, this longing to go back home, but also this intense connection to Orphalese.
Yeah, it's like he understands that he can't stay there forever, but it's still hard to leave.
Yeah, it's like staying there would make him freeze and crystallize, but leaving is breaking his heart.
It's a tough spot to be in.
And as he gets to the bottom of the hill, all these people come out calling his name.
They must have loved him.
Yeah, and it makes him wonder if this goodbye is actually like a new beginning.
Oh, interesting.
Like his sunset is actually his dawn.
I like that.
And he's also thinking about what he can offer to these people who've stopped their whole day just to come see him off.
Yeah, that's a big question.
And he sees himself as a seeker of silences. He doesn't think he's the source of wisdom, but more like a vessel for it.
He's humble.
Yeah, he believes that anything he might know is actually inspired by something much bigger than himself.
That's a really interesting perspective.
Yeah, and as he enters the city, all the elders come up to him and beg him to stay.
They must have recognized how special he was.
They tell him that he's been a noontide in our twilight. Like he brought light and warmth to their lives.
Wow.
And the priests and priestesses are all there too, and you can really feel their love for him pouring out.
It sounds like it was a pretty emotional scene.
It really was, and it makes you think about how we often don't realize how much we care about someone until they're about to leave.
Yeah, it's like absence makes the heart grow fonder or something.
Exactly.
And that's when we meet Amitra.
Oh, yeah, the seeress.
She's got this special connection with Al-Mustafa. She was the first person in Orphalese who really believed in him.
Yeah, she saw something special in him right away.
And she gets him, she understands that he needs to leave Orphalese.
Yeah, she knows he can't be held back.
But she has one request before he goes.
I bet it's a good one.
She wants him to share his wisdom with them.
What a great idea.
Yeah, she's like, tell us what you've learned about life and death. The stuff that really matters.
Yeah, the stuff that can be passed down through generations.
Exactly.
And the first thing she asks him about is love.
Classic Almitra, always going for the big questions.
And when he starts to speak, this hush falls over the crowd.
Like everyone's holding their breath.
And his voice is described as being like really powerful and resonant.
I bet you could feel it in your bones.
Totally. And he starts off by saying that you have to follow love even when it's difficult.
Ooh, that's a good one.
He says, though his ways are hard and steep, and when his wings enfold you, yield to him, though the sword hidden among his pinions may wound you.
Wow, so he's not saying that love is easy.
Definitely not. He's saying that sometimes it's going to hurt.
That's real.
Yeah, and then he compares love to this powerful force that can shatter your dreams, like a north wind ripping through a garden.
That's an intense image.
It is, but he's saying that it's for a reason.
Like it's breaking you down to build you up again.
Exactly, like pruning a plant so it can grow stronger.
So it's not about avoiding the hard parts of love.
No, it's about embracing them.
Because those are the parts that really change you.
Yeah, and then he uses all these amazing metaphors for how love transforms you.
Oh, yeah, I love this part.
He says love gathers you like sheaves of corn and then threshes you to make you naked.
It's getting intense.
I know, and then love sifts you to free you from all the stuff that's holding you back.
Like getting rid of all the impurities.
Yeah, and then love grinds you down and kneads you until you're pliable.
Wow, it's like a whole baking process.
It is, and finally love puts you in the sacred fire to become sacred bread.
It's like you're being purified and made into something new.
Yeah, and he's saying that this whole process is about really getting to know your own heart
That's deep.
and also becoming a part of something bigger, life's heart.
It's about connecting to something beyond yourself.
Yeah, and then he talks about what happens when you only seek out the comfortable parts of love.
Like the peace and the pleasure.
Yeah, he says that leads to a kind of stagnant life.
You get stuck.
Yeah, he calls it a seasonless world where your emotions are kind of dulled.
So you're not fully experiencing life.
Exactly, you're avoiding the things that make you feel alive.
Interesting.
And then he gives this really amazing definition of love.
I love his definition.
He says, love gives not but itself and takes not, but from itself love possesses not, nor would it be possessed, for love is sufficient unto love.
Wow, that's beautiful.
It's powerful, right?
Yeah, it's like he's saying that love is this complete thing in itself.
Yeah, it doesn't need anything else.
It's not about taking or possessing.
No, it's about giving freely and completely.
It's its own reward.
And then he talks about how we should think about expressing love.
I'm curious to hear this.
He says, instead of saying God is in my heart, we should say, I am in the heart of God.
Oh, that's a shift in perspective.
Yeah, it's about recognizing that you're part of something much larger than yourself.
And that love is part of that too.
Yeah, and he says that if love finds you worthy, it will guide your path.
Like it has its own plan for you.
Yeah, and its only desire is to fulfill itself.
So love has its own purpose.
And then he ends this whole section on love by describing all these beautiful things that love desires.
Oh, I love this part. It's so poetic.
He says love wants to melt like a stream singing to the night,
That's gorgeous.
and it wants to know the pain of too much tenderness,
So it's not afraid of feeling deeply.
and to be wounded by understanding,
Oh, that's interesting.
and to bleed willingly and joyfully.
It's embracing all the intensity of love.
Yeah, and to wake up with a grateful heart,
It's about appreciating every moment.
and to meditate on love's ecstasy at noon,
Like basking in the fullness of it.
and to return home with gratitude,
It's about cherishing the simple things.
and finally to sleep with a prayer and a song for the beloved.
It's about carrying love with you always.
It's a really beautiful and complete vision of love.
It really is.
So next Almetra asks him about marriage.
Okay, another big one.
And he starts off by describing marriage as this incredibly deep unity.
Yeah, like two souls coming together.
He says it endures even beyond death and resides in God's silent memory.
So it's not just a temporary thing.
Not at all, it's eternal.
Wow.
But then he immediately says that there needs to be space within that togetherness.
That's interesting.
He says, let there be spaces in your togetherness, and let the winds of the heavens dance between you.
That's such a beautiful image.
It is, isn't it?
Like you can be close without being suffocating.
Exactly, you need room to breathe and grow.
And he says that love and marriage shouldn't be a bond, but a moving you see between the shores of your souls.
I love that.
Yeah, it's fluid and ever-changing.
And he uses these great analogies like filling each other's cups but not drinking from the same one, and sharing bread but not eating from the same loaf.
I like that it's about supporting each other without losing yourself.
Yeah, and he compares it to a lute with two strings that play together, but each has its own unique sound.
They create harmony, but they're still separate.
And then he says you should give your hearts but not into each other's keeping.
Because ultimately, only life itself can hold them.
It's like a reminder that you still belong to yourself.
That's important.
And he ends this section with the image of two pillars of a temple standing together but separate.
Like they're supporting the same structure, but they're still distinct.
And he also compares it to two trees growing side by side.
So it's about being connected, but also independent.
Exactly.
This is great stuff.
I know. And then this woman in the crowd who's holding her baby asks him about children.
Okay, I think I know what's coming next.
This is probably the most famous part of the whole book.
Yeah, it's the one everyone quotes.
All right, so he says, your children are not your children.
Boom, mic drop.
It's powerful, right?
So powerful.
And he goes on to say that they are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself.
Like they come through you, but not from you.
Exactly, and they don't belong to you in the sense that you own them.
You're more like a caretaker.
Yeah, and he says that you can give them love, but you can't give them their thoughts.
They have their own minds.
And you can house their bodies, but not their souls.
Because their souls belong to the future.
And he says life goes not backward nor tarries with yesterday.
Like you can't force them to be like you.
Nope, they have their own path to follow.
And then he uses this amazing analogy of parents being bows and children being arrows.
And life is the archer.
I love this one.
He's saying that the archer loves both the arrow and the bow.
So the parent's job is to be strong and steady.
And to let the arrow fly.
Wow, that's deep.
I know. And then a rich man steps forward and asks about giving.
Okay, this should be good.
And he starts off by making this distinction between giving possessions and truly giving of yourself.
Yeah, there's a big difference there.
And he says that a lot of times people hold on to their possessions because they're afraid of not having enough in the future.
Yeah, fear can make you greedy.
And he says that fear itself is a kind of need.
Interesting.
And then he talks about all these different ways that people give.
Like, what are the motivations behind giving?
Yeah, so some people give a little bit of what they have and they want everyone to know about it.
They're looking for recognition.
And he calls that unwholesome.
This is not about ego.
But then there are people who have very little, but they give everything they have.
Those are the true believers in life, he says.
And then there are people who give with joy.
Like the act of giving itself brings them happiness.
And others who give with pain.
Like they're sacrificing something.
And he says that pain can be a kind of baptism.
Wow.
And then he talks about the people who give without even thinking about it.
They just give naturally.
Yeah, he compares them to the myrtle tree that releases its fragrance without any expectation.
It's just being itself.
And he says that God speaks through those people.
That's beautiful.
And then he talks about the value of giving without being asked.
Like seeing a need and filling it.
Yeah, and he says that the search for someone to receive is actually a greater joy than giving itself.
That's a really interesting perspective.
And then he says, is there aught you would withhold? All you have shall someday be given, therefore give now.
It's like he's saying, don't wait to give.
Yeah, give freely and abundantly while you can.
And he challenges the idea that you should only give to those who deserve it.
Yeah, he uses the example of trees and flocks.
They give so that they can live.
And he says, anyone who is worthy of days and nights is worthy of everything else.
Like, just being alive makes you worthy.
And having the courage to receive is also a gift.
Hmm.
And then he questions our right to judge other people's worthiness.
Who are we to decide who deserves what?
Yeah, and he says that true giving is life-giving unto life.
Like it's a natural flow.
And we're just witnesses to it.
And he ends by saying that if you receive a gift, you shouldn't be burdened by gratitude.
Yeah, it's not about feeling indebted.
You should rise with the giver on the wings of the gift.
Like you're both lifted up by the act of giving.
And trust in the generosity of life and God.
It's a beautiful way to think about it.
So what's next?
Well, then an old innkeeper comes up and asks about eating and drinking.
Interesting.
And he starts off by saying that ideally we would live on the fragrance of the earth and light.
Like plants.
But since we can't do that, we have to kill to eat and take milk to drink.
That's the reality of being human.
And he says that we should make these acts into acts of worship.
Like a sacred ritual?
And he says our table should be an altar.
Where we sacrifice the innocent for the pure innocent in us.
And he gives these specific thoughts to have when you're killing an animal for food.
Like, what should you be thinking about?
He says you should acknowledge that you also have the power to be slain and consumed.
Like it's a cycle of life and death.
And that blood is the sap that feeds the tree of heaven.
It's all connected.
And then he talks about what to think about when you're eating an apple.
This is going to be good.
He says to think about the seeds that are living in your body.
Like the potential for new life.
And the buds that are blossoming in your heart.
New beginnings.
And the fragrance becoming your breath.
Like you're taking in the essence of the apple.
And to rejoice together.
It's a celebration of life.
And when you're gathering grapes, he says to think of yourself as a vineyard for the winepress.
You're being transformed.
And you're becoming like new wine in eternal vessels.
Wow.
And he says that in winter, you should have a song for each cup of wine.
Like a toast to the harvest.
Remembering the autumn days and the vineyard and the wine press.
It's about honoring the whole process.
And then a ploughman steps forward and asks about work.
Okay, this is a big one.
And he starts off by saying that work is how we keep pace with the earth and its soul.
Like we're in sync with nature?
And if we're idle, we become estranged from the seasons and the procession of life.
We lose our connection to the natural world.
And he compares meaningful work to a flute through which the whispering of the hours turns to music.
Beautiful.
And he contrasts that with being a dumb and silent reed.
Like you're not expressing your potential.
And he challenges the idea that work is a curse.
Yeah, a lot of people see it that way.
He says it's actually part of fulfilling the earth's dream.
So it's a positive thing.
And it's an act of loving life and its inmost secret. And then he addresses the belief that birth is an affliction.
Like being born is a bad thing.
And he says that only the sweat of your brow can wash away that belief.
So work is a kind of redemption.
And to those who think life is darkness, he says it's only dark when there's no urge or knowledge or love in your work.
So it's about bringing those things to your work.
Yeah, and he says that when you work with love, you're binding yourself to others and to God.
It's all connected.
And he gives these examples of working with love.
Like, what does that look like?
He says it's weaving cloth as if your beloved would wear it, and building a house with affection for a beloved.
It's putting your heart into it.
And sowing seeds with tenderness and reaping with joy because a beloved will eat the food.
Like you're doing it for someone you care about.
And charging all your creations with your spirit.
And knowing that the blessed dead are watching over you.
It's a beautiful way to think about work.
It really is.
And then he talks about how people compare different types of work.
Like who's more important, the marble sculptor or the plowman?
Yeah, and he says it doesn't matter.
All work is valuable.
As long as you're doing it with love.
And he says that true greatness is turning the wind's voice into a song made sweeter by your own loving.
That's beautiful.
And then he ends with this really powerful statement.
Hit me with it.
Work is love made visible.
Wow.
And he says that if you can't work with love, you should take alms from those who do.
Because work done without love is bitter. He says it produces bitter brads and poisonous wine and muffled songs.
So find something you can do with love.
That's the key.
So that was a lot.
I know, it was just a taste.
Just a glimpse into the vast ocean of wisdom in this book.
Gibran explores so many facets of the human condition.
We didn't even touch on joy and sorrow, or houses, or clothes, or crime and punishment.
Or laws, or freedom, or reason and passion.
Or pain, or self-knowledge, or teaching, or friendship.
Or talking, or time, or good and evil.
Or prayer, or pleasure, or beauty, or religion, or death.
Each of those sections is just as insightful as the ones we talked about.
And you know the way Almostafa says goodbye, but also promises to return?
Yeah.
It's like he's saying that learning is a continuous process.
It never ends.
So here's a thought for you to chew on.
Remember how Al-Mustafa felt about leaving Orphalese?
Like he was leaving parts of himself behind.
And his heart was full of longing.
Can you relate to that?
Have you ever felt that way when you've had to say goodbye to something or someone?
And if you think about those moments as scattering fragments of the spirit and leaving behind a heart made sweet with hunger and thirst,
Does that change how you see them?
it's a different way of looking at loss.
Maybe it can even be a beautiful thing.
Something to think about.
Until next time.
Keep diving.